Carter looked like anyone else rushing through Dallas, Fort Worth Airport that morning, hair tied in a loose bun, travel mug in hand, tote slung over her shoulder. She wore jeans, a gray sweater, and that calm, practiced smile of someone who'd done this countless times before. Gate 32 was loud with boarding calls and impatient travelers, but seemed detached, lost in her own quiet rhythm. She scanned her boarding pass, thanked the attendant softly, and stepped down the jet bridge toward Flight 482 bound for Washington, D.C. The flight attendants greeted her cheerfully, unaware that her name Carter had triggered 3 separate system pings the moment she checked in. In a control room hundreds of miles away, an analyst stared at her screen. "Sir, the Carter alias just appeared again." "Are you sure it's her?" "Positive, same biometric match." The order came fast: "Track but don't intercept yet." Took her seat in row 24 by the window. She exhaled slowly, pretending to scroll through her phone while her eyes followed the movements of the crew outside. She always watched the ground crew, habits from another life. She counted vehicles, noted security personnel, traced exits. Nothing unusual. Still, a strange pressure tugged in her chest, the feeling of being seen. When the plane lifted off, she closed her eyes and let the vibration hum through her. She told herself this trip was supposed to be simple, quiet, in and out of D.C. within a day, but she'd told herself that before, and nothing about her life had been simple in 20 years. 30 minutes into the flight, the captain's calm voice echoed overhead. "Ladies, and this is your captain speaking. We're currently cruising at 31,000 feet, the usual speech, polite, predictable, relaxed, until the captain's tone changed mid-sentence. "And we've just been informed of a small procedural matter. Please remain seated for the duration of the flight." The intercom clicked off. Around her, a few passengers exchanged nervous glances. Turbulence? Maybe, but knew that tone. It wasn't turbulence, it was protocol. Her heart pounded, but her face remained expressionless. She turned her head slightly, catching a flicker of something outside the window. Then she heard it. A deep, low thunder that didn't belong to the engines. 2 F-22 Raptors slid into formation beside the plane, their sleek silver bodies glinting in the sunlight. Gasps rippled through the cabin. Someone shouted, "Are those military jets?" Another began filming with a phone. The captain's voice returned, strained but steady. "Everything's fine, folks, just a routine escort." Routine, knew better. Fighters didn't escort commercial flights unless something or someone mattered. She sank back into her seat, her pulse quick but controlled. The woman next to her, an elderly traveler clutching a rosary, whispered, "Oh dear Lord, what's happening?" Forced a faint smile. "It'll be over soon." But inside, her mind was racing. They'd found her, finally. After 2 decades of silence, the past she'd buried under a false name was clawing its way back. She remembered Kabul, the heat, the coded messages, the night everything exploded, literally and politically, the betrayal that made her vanish. Rhodes had died that night. Carter was supposed to live quietly forever. Yet here they were, F-22s circling above America just because of her. A young flight attendant hurried down the aisle trying to stay composed. "Ma'am, please fasten your—" Her voice was calm when she asked, "Captain still up front?" The attendant blinked. "Yes, ma'am, you know him," nodded faintly. "We've met." That was a lie, but it worked. The attendant moved on, unsettled. The man in front of leaned toward the window, filming. "Damn, look at that. Real Air Force jets. What did someone do, smuggle a nuke?" The cabin laughed nervously. His fingers curled into fists beneath her sweater. If they knew what she'd once carried across borders, they'd stop laughing. The F-22s dipped slightly, signaling a communication exchange. Somewhere in the cockpit, a code message flashed on the captain's monitor. "Flight 482, maintain course. Do not deviate. Passenger 24 be confirmed. Await further orders." The captain's knuckles whitened around the controls. "Who the hell is 24B?" he muttered. His co-pilot glanced at the manifest. Carter, he read. Then he hesitated. Wait, her ID lists a previous name. The captain turned. Which is? The co-pilot swallowed. Rhodes. Silence filled the cockpit. Outside, the jets kept their distance, but both pilots could feel it, the weight of a name powerful enough to move the Air Force mid-flight. Back in seat 24B, looked out the window again, her reflection overlapping the wing. She whispered to herself, I warned them this would happen. And for the first time in years, the ordinary woman allowed herself to feel afraid. Captain Daniel had spent 20 years in the skis, but nothing prepared him for what was unfolding in front of him now. Two F-22 Raptors shadowed his aircraft like silver predators. He'd flown through lightning storms, engine failures, and even one bird strike over Denver, but never had he seen the United States Air Force treating his flight like a target. The message flashing on his monitor was short and chilling. Maintain altitude, do not divert, passenger 24 be confirmed, await ground command. He read it 3 times, hoping it would change. It didn't. His co-pilot, Mark, looked pale. Sir, that's a level 1 intercept code. His hands gripped the yoke. I know. Level 1 meant national security. It meant a threat so dangerous that the White House was already aware. Mark scrolled the passenger manifest nervously. Seat 24B, Carter, but he squinted. There's a maiden name here, it's been redacted. Frowned, redacted, on a commercial manifest. Mark clicked deeper. A faint name flickered on the screen before disappearing. Rhodes, he whispered, Rhodes. Froze, that name. He'd heard it once years ago during his short assignment flying personnel for the CIA. A whispered conversation in a hangar, men in suits talking about Rhodes Protocol. He never learned what it meant, but the tone was unforgettable. The kind used when talking about ghosts that never should existed. He turned toward the F-22s, their canopies glinting like knives in the sun. Washington, this is Flight 482 requesting clarification on our escort, he said through the radio. We have military aircraft on our wing. What's happening? Static, then a clipped voice replied, Flight 482, continue course. Do not communicate further. Classified operation in progress. Then silence. Mark exhaled shakily. Sir, what do we do? Leaned back. We follow orders and pray this doesn't end above a headline. Back in the cabin, passengers were restless. A few whispered, others prayed. One man started. The flight attendants tried to calm them, but fear had a smell, and it was spreading. Sat still, staring at the clouds. She knew how military responses worked. She had designed some of them. She could tell from the formation pattern that this wasn't a shoot-down protocol, yet it was containment. They wanted her alive. That meant they needed something she knew. The woman beside her, clutching her cross necklace, broke the silence. Why are they following us? Hesitated, then smiled faintly. Maybe someone important. The woman chuckled nervously. Someone like who? Turned her gaze out the window again. Someone who shouldn't exist. The F-22s repositioned, signaling a coded formation. Recognized the maneuver instantly, Delta Pattern Bravo. It wasn't a warning. It was a command to prepare for forced landing. Her pulse quickened. She pulled her phone from her pocket, typing a single line into a hidden app disguised as a calendar. Protocol breached. Phase 2 initiated. Then she hit send. The message vanished into encrypted networks she hadn't accessed in over a decade. Somewhere deep in Virginia, a computer pinged. An old man in a dark office lifted his head slowly as the alert appeared. He hadn't seen that code since the night they buried Agent Rhodes. His hand trembled as he picked up the phone. She's alive, he whispered. She actually came back. The light blinked on. Captain Voice returned, his composure cracking slightly. Ladies and we've been instructed to make a precautionary landing at Air Force Base. Please remain seated. Gasps filled the cabin. People began filming, others whispering, Air Force Base. Why there? closed her eyes. They're pulling me in. The elderly woman beside her frowned. You talk like you expected this. Lips tightened. I didn't expect it, I planned for it. The plane began its slow descent. The fighter jet stayed locked beside them, motionless, patient, reached into her tote bag and touched a small metal locket. Inside was a picture of a young soldier, smiling, unaware that his betrayal would cost a nation. The engines droned lower. The cabin lights dimmed. Fear was tangible now, hanging thick in the air like static before a storm. Mark glanced at the radar. Sir, they've cleared every other flight out of our path. We're the only one in this corridor. Nodded grimly. That means they're expecting something big. Down below at Air Force Base, a line of armored vehicles was already forming. Officers barked orders, rifles slung, faces tense. One man adjusted his earpiece and said quietly, "Target confirmed. Priority 1. Do not engage until Colonel gives the order." As the plane pierced through the clouds, opened her eyes again. The capital's skyline shimmered faintly in the distance. "Welcome back, Rhodes," she murmured to herself. "Let's see who still remembers." The woman beside her heard only the whisper and shivered without knowing why. And as Flight 482 lined up for descent, the F-22s held their position, silent, cold, and waiting for the woman whose name had once rewritten American history. At exactly 10:37 a.m., the radar screens inside NORAD Command, Colorado Springs, flashed red. A digital siren pierced the operations room. Controllers swarmed their consoles, eyes darting between altitude numbers and encrypted messages. Colonel Thomas, a 40-year veteran with a reputation for icy composure, strode in, coffee still in hand. "Report. Commercial Flight 482, sir. Delta Airlines, en route Dallas to DC-2, F-22s assigned escort under Level 1 protocol." Stopped cold. "Level 1, who authorized that?" "Joint Command, sir. Directive came straight from Homeland Security. Passenger 24 be flagged as Priority 1, identity classified." He frowned. "Name?" The technician hesitated, then swallowed. "Carter alias Rhodes." For a second didn't breathe. The name hit like a punch to the chest. He hadn't heard it since Operation, 22 years ago, the mission that had destroyed careers, friendships, and nearly the country itself. He set the coffee down carefully. That file was sealed under presidential order. "Yes, sir, but the biometric system picked her up during boarding." Leaned closer to the screen. Flight 482's green blip glowed steady among the static lines. "You're telling me a dead agent just triggered NORAD's highest alert on a passenger flight over Kansas?" "Yes, sir." He rubbed his jaw. "Rhodes. Back then she'd been a civilian analyst turned operative, a ghost who uncovered a double agent selling missile codes to foreign buyers. They never found the buyer, and when the mission went sideways in Kabul, Rhodes vanished in the chaos, declared killed in an explosion. Except she wasn't dead. She was sitting in seat 24B, heading straight for Washington. "Patch me through to command," he ordered. A secure line crackled. "Colonel. This is at NORAD. I want that plane diverted immediately. Use call sign Sentinel-9. A pause. "Sir, White House already issued that directive. They want her detained the moment she lands." Stared at the monitor as the twin F-22s adjusted formation around the civilian jet. Detained. That wasn't good enough. If she'd resurfaced, it meant unfinished business was back too. "Copy," he said. "Initiate blackout, no media feeds. I want civilian radar blinded for the next 10 minutes. "Understood, sir." The room dimmed as security filters engaged. Only the colonel's monitors remained alive, one civilian aircraft surrounded by two military shadows. Meanwhile, aboard Flight 482, the tension thickened. Watch the F-22s through the glass. She could almost feel the pilot's eyes on her. They'd been briefed. not about who she was but what she represented. Her hands trembled slightly. She hid them under her sweater. She had lived 2 decades running from the consequences of a single decision. Now those consequences were closing in at Mach 2. She reached for her locket again, pressing it tight. Inside, the picture of a young soldier smiled back, Captain Liam Cross, once her handler, once her betrayal. Flight 482, maintain course and altitude. The Air Force controller's voice came over the cockpit radio. Prepare for guided descent. Captain exchanged a grim look with Mark. They're vectoring us to. Why, sir? Because that's where secrets go to die. Back at NORAD, watched as the radar marker turned east toward D.C. God help us if she's telling the truth, he muttered. A communications officer turned. Sir. Rhodes once warned us that wasn't over, he said quietly. If she's coming back now, it means the threat never left. He straightened. Notify the Pentagon. Tell them Rhodes has resurfaced. Message content, sir. Hesitated, then dictated slowly, word for word. The ghost of is alive. She's coming home. He sent the transmission. Seconds later, hundreds of miles away, deep beneath the Pentagon, a red light flickered to life in an abandoned command room that hadn't been touched in years. A computer hummed awake, displaying a single classified file. Code name, STRFALL status. REACTIVED Flight 482 trembled slightly as it began its guided descent toward Air Force Base. Inside, passengers whispered nervously, gripping armrests, trying to mask their fear with forced smiles. Phones glowed in the dim cabin, capturing shaky videos of the fighter jets still flanking the plane. Some whispered about terrorism. Others prayed aloud. But Carter, or Rhodes, sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on the window, her face calm, almost serene. She knew this feeling. The hum of engines, the subtle tilt of the aircraft, the faint vibrations signaling authority. Only now it wasn't a mission, it was a trap or a test. The elderly woman beside her leaned in, voice trembling. Are they going to shoot us down? Allowed herself a faint, controlled smile. No, she said softly, they're not here for you. The cabin went quiet. A nervous laugh from the back cut through the tension, closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. 2 decades of hiding had led to this exact scenario. Somewhere far above, the F-22s communicated silently through their radar and encrypted signals. Could almost read the pattern Delta Pattern Bravo. She had memorized it years ago for missions that were classified to everyone, even her closest allies. The maneuver wasn't hostile, it was containment. They wanted her alive. That meant someone high up still needed her knowledge. Captain's voice broke the tense hum. Ladies, we'll be landing at Air Force Base in approximately 15 minutes. Please remain seated and fasten your. His words were calm, but noticed his hands were tight around the controls. He was sweating. A young mother turned to her child. It's okay, honey, nothing to worry about. His gaze shifted briefly to them. Innocent civilians. They didn't know the storm heading their way, the storm that had already been decades in the making. His mind raced, recalling Operation, the betrayal in Kabul, the double agent, the explosion that had made the world believe she was dead. She remembered the faces of the few who had trusted her. Liam Cross, Colonel, friends who had vanished or been killed. And now, 20 years later, she was back, reappearing in the eyes of people who had thought they'd buried the past forever. Her nudged her again. How do you know so much about this? Lips tightened. I don't. I remember. A flicker of fear crossed the woman's eyes, but ignored it. The plane tilted slightly as it entered the military-controlled airspace. The F-22s maintained their silent escort. Captain glanced at the radar. Flight path cleared. Prepare for final approach, he said. His voice betrayed the tension he was trying to hide. Mark, his co-pilot, whispered, Sir, they're serious about keeping her alive, aren't they? Didn't answer. He had seen this before, silent authority, unseen but deadly precise. Reached into her tote bag and touched a small locket. A photograph of Liam Cross, smiling as if nothing had gone wrong. She had to keep herself calm. If she lost focus, the decades of planning, hiding, and surviving would be wasted. The plane dipped closer to the runway. Engines roared, tires screeched lightly against the tarmac. The F-22s circled overhead, scanning the perimeter. Air Force Base was fully mobilized. Armed personnel flanked the runway, vehicles lined the perimeter, and cameras monitored every angle. The moment dreaded had arrived. A landing where every person on the ground knew her name, yet few knew her story. Straightened in her seat, she had been ready for this. For 20 years she had planned to vanish, to hide, to survive. But the past doesn't stay buried forever, and the past had found her. As the plane taxied toward the assigned docking zone, the passengers were oblivious to the significance of the moment. They were scared, confused, and curious. Simply watched, calm and focused, prepared to step into a world that believed she had died, yet had never forgotten her. Somewhere above, the F-22 pilots communicated silently, a flicker of recognition passing between them. The name Rhodes had reactivated the entire defense network, and for the first time in decades, Rhodes was about to confront the men who had buried her past, and the secrets that still threatened the nation. The ramp of Air Force Base stretched wide, flanked by rows of armed personnel. The sun reflected off helmets and rifles, creating a stark, almost surreal glare. Passengers filed off Flight 482 in small groups, murmuring nervously. Cameras flashed as a few journalists, embedded under special clearance, tried to catch images, but none came close to the truth behind seat 24B. Carter remained in her seat calm. Two agents in dark tactical gear approached her, their expressions neutral but alert. "Ma'am, please follow us," one instructed. Her voice was soft, controlled. "Lead the way." The passengers parted respectfully, unaware that the woman stepping off the plane was not just any civilian. She carried with her 2 decades of secrets, buried lives, classified missions, and the one man who had betrayed her. As she descended the steps, noted every detail, the placement of personnel, the escape routes, the vehicles waiting for transport. Habits ingrained from a life spent in intelligence kicked in automatically. She had trained for situations like this, even if no one knew it. A general waited at the bottom of the steps, his posture formal, yet tension radiated from him. He held out a hand, a salute but tinged with acknowledgement. Paused, studied him. "Colonel," she asked. The general's eyes widened slightly, then he nodded. "Welcome back, Agent Rhodes," he said, his voice low, edged with disbelief. 2 tactical SUVs waited nearby. Was guided into the first one, doors closing silently behind her. Inside, the vehicle hummed as it rolled across the tarmac. The F-22s still maintained their formation overhead, scanning every inch of the surrounding area. Could see the pilots' movements mirrored in the cockpit, trained, precise, yet curious. They had never forgotten her name. Inside the SUV, an agent spoke quietly, almost respectfully. "You disappeared after operation. Everyone thought you were dead." His hands folded neatly in her lap. That's exactly what they wanted them to believe. Her eyes, however, scanned every reflection, every detail inside the blacked-out vehicle. Every step, every movement mattered. Lives had depended on it. The vehicle stopped at a secure entrance. Armed guards checked credentials, then motioned for them to proceed. The hallway beyond was stark, whitewashed, and unnervingly quiet. Only the distant hum of computers suggested life. Followed the agent, her every step measured, calm. But internally she calculated, remembered, anticipated. A secure briefing room awaited her. Inside, 6 intelligence officers stood, reviewing tablets and monitors, faces grim. One stepped forward. "Agent Rhodes, you weren't supposed to be alive." His expression softened slightly. "I didn't have a choice." They exchanged a tense silence. Then another officer pressed forward. "Why surface now? 20 years gone, and suddenly Flight 482 triggers the entire air defense system. Why?" pulled the locket from her tote bag and held it briefly in her hand. Because the man behind the one who betrayed us, he's still alive, and he's already inside the Pentagon. The room went silent. Some officers exchanged uneasy glances, recognizing that her return wasn't just a security breach, it was a warning. The colonel who had authorized the intercept finally entered, breathless and sharp-eyed. He looked scanning her face for changes, for signs of weakness. You realize your name just caused the biggest domestic security alert in decades. Met his gaze evenly. Then I did the right thing. Took a step back, exhaling sharply. You understand the risks, don't you? Coming back, exposing yourself. One wrong move. I've been living with wrong moves for 20 years, replied quietly. If I waited any longer, it wouldn't just be me at risk. For the first time since stepping off Flight 482, she allowed herself to breathe, not relief, but anticipation. This was just the beginning. The next phase, the real confrontation, was about to start. The storm she had evaded for decades was closing in, and now she was ready. Outside, the F-22s still hovered silently. Inside, Rhodes prepared to face the men who had buried her identity, and the threat she had once stopped, knowing full well that nothing would ever be ordinary again. The room was cold, sterile, and silent, except for the hum of computer monitors tracking global data streams. Rhodes stood at the center, calm, her posture controlled, yet every muscle tensed for the confrontation ahead. 6 intelligence officers, including Colonel, stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman before them with the ghost they had believed dead for 20 years. You disappeared after operation, one officer began, voice edged with disbelief. Everyone thought you were killed in Kabul. Why are you alive? Hands clasped together, fingers brushing the locket against her palm. Because faking my death was the only way to survive and to keep the mission alive. You buried me in silence, but I never stopped watching, never stopped preparing. Another officer stepped forward, pushing a tablet toward her. On it were encrypted messages, financial transfers, and intercepted communications. We found these anomalies inside the Pentagon, he said. We need to know if you're involved. His eyes flicked over the data. Some of it she had planted herself years ago, back when she still had access. I'm not involved in any current breach, she said. But someone else is, someone I tried to stop decades ago, and if we don't act fast, they'll succeed. Colonel paced the room, voice low and sharp. Explain, who is this threat? And why did your name trigger an entire air defense protocol? That's classified level 1, nothing like it has happened in 20 years. His gaze hardened. The man behind, he's alive. He's inside the Pentagon. He's been waiting for me to resurface. And now that I'm here, he's moving. She paused, letting her words settle. You all thought I was gone. He thought he was safe, but he underestimated me. The officers exchanged tense glances. The implications were staggering. If Rhodes, presumed dead for decades, had intelligence that could compromise a foreign agent inside the Pentagon, the nation's security was at immediate risk. One of the younger officers hesitated. Ma'am, how do you know this? How can you be sure? Took a deep breath, recalling every clandestine operation, every covert surveillance, every coded message she had intercepted over the years. Because I designed the tracking systems. I know the patterns of infiltration, and I've seen the moves he makes. He's predictable, arrogant, but clever. He believes in shadows, but he doesn't know the shadows have eyes now. Colonel finally stopped packing. You're telling me, after 20 years, you've been monitoring a mole inside our own government, and you didn't contact us until now. I couldn't, she said softly, her voice steady but cold. If I had, the mole would have vanished and we'd lose the chance to stop him. The only way to neutralize him is for me to surface on my own terms. Silence hung thick in the room. Every officer understood that Rhodes was more than an operative. She was a weapon, a key that had been dormant for 2 decades, now activated. Finally spoke, All right, you've resurfaced, we'll support you, full clearance, whatever you need, but if you fail. Didn't flinch. I won't fail, not now, not ever. I survived the explosion in Kabul, I survived the betrayal, and I survived the years in hiding. This ends with me, on my terms. For the first time in decades, Rhodes allowed herself to feel something more than caution, anticipation. The storm she had avoided for 20 years had finally arrived, and now she was ready to confront it head-on. Outside, the F-22s maintained their silent vigil. Inside, the secure briefing room buzzed with tension, calculations, and fear. The woman once presumed dead had returned, not for revenge, not for recognition, but to finish a mission that had begun long before any of them had walked through those doors. Rhodes was back, and the past was coming alive again. Within minutes of Rhodes' reappearance, Washington, D.C. transformed from its usual hum of government routine into controlled chaos. Red alerts flashed across secure networks, phones rang incessantly, and agents scrambled through corridors, trying to intercept any potential leaks. NORAD, the Pentagon, and Homeland Security were now operating on a single directive: contain the threat inside the Pentagon. That threat, of course, was the same woman who had once vanished from history. Watched from the observation room atop Air Force Base, her hands folded, lips pressed together. She wasn't part of the frantic scramble, but she understood it perfectly. Every decision, every command, every movement of personnel was predictable if you had spent decades reading shadows, monitoring encrypted channels, and tracing anomalies. Colonel entered the room, his face lined with tension. "Ma'am," he said, lowering his voice, "you realize what just happened. Your name alone triggered the biggest domestic security alert since 9/11. Didn't flinch, then I did the right thing." Shook his head, packing in frustration. "Do you understand what this means? The Pentagon is on lockdown, traffic in the Capitol is diverted, secret channels are scrambled, all because you surfaced." "I know," she said softly, "and it's necessary. The man behind, he's alive and he's already inside. I couldn't wait any longer." Outside, a convoy of black SUVs sped through Washington streets, escorted by armed agents and accompanied by low-flying helicopters. Emergency protocols activated. Every possible exit to sensitive government buildings was monitored. Watched the maps on her tablet, every movement predicted, every agent accounted for. She could see the chessboard, and she was already 10 steps ahead of the players. The president's office was a flurry of activity. Advisors argued about the implications of her resurfacing. "Is she a threat?" one asked. "Or the only one who can stop the real threat?" Another advisor muttered, "We should have her earlier." But they all paused when a secure line pinged, displaying Rhodes' encrypted authorization. She had activated access protocols only a few minutes after landing, allowing her to view the Pentagon's internal operations, real-time personnel movements, and communications logs. Her eyes scanned names, clearance levels, and access codes. Somewhere among them was the mole, the same man responsible for betraying the operation decades ago. Leaned over her shoulder, "You're sure it's him?" Nodded. "Every pattern fits. Every anomaly, every hidden transfer. He's arrogant, overconfident, and reckless. He thinks he's untouchable, but he forgot one thing." "What's that?" asked, eyes narrowing. "I never stopped watching," she said. Her voice was calm, almost chilling. "And now the shadows have eyes." The clock ticked down toward a critical juncture. Knew that one false move, one misstep, could trigger a cascade that would compromise national security. Yet she also knew that inaction was no longer an option. Her focus shifted to the Pentagon. Digital feeds displayed encrypted data streams, each a potential clue to the mole's presence. Agents moved like shadows across the building, unaware that one person inside had already traced every route, calculated every contingency, and anticipated every reaction. Exhaled slowly. "So, this is why the Air Force intercepted your flight, and why they froze when they saw your name." allowed herself a small smile. They remembered me, that's enough for now. Outside, the F-22s circled, watching the capital with deadly precision. The world beyond was unaware of the storm descending. Inside, Rhodes prepared herself for the final moves of a game decades in the making. The mole inside the Pentagon was counting on chaos, but chaos, she knew, could be controlled. And as the first agents began to move toward suspected offices, whispered under her breath, "Time to finish this, once and for all." The calm before the storm had ended. The real operation, the one that had begun 20 years ago, was finally about to reach its climax. The night was thick over Washington, D.C., the city bathed in the muted glow of streetlights and security. Inside the Pentagon, every hallway buzzed with tension. Agents like Shadow, checking ID badges, tracking encrypted signals, and coordinating movements. But one person moved with purpose, Rhodes, calm, precise, and every step deliberate. She wasn't just walking through the chaos, she was orchestrating it. She paused at a secure elevator, her reflection in the polished metal door reminding her of everything she had survived: betrayal, loss, and death itself. She had returned not as a ghost, but as a force no one could ignore. Colonel appeared behind her, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. "This is it, Rhodes," he said quietly. "Once you go in, everything changes. Are you ready?" Nodded. "I've been ready for 20 years. The elevator descended silently, carrying her closer to the inner sanctum, the heart of the Pentagon where the mole had hidden for decades. Intelligence indicated he was orchestrating a covert operation, using the secrets to manipulate global defense systems. Every moment she delayed gave him leverage. The doors opened. Inside, dimly lit corridors stretched ahead, moved like a phantom, her steps silent, eyes scanning every corner. Every door, every security camera, every agent was accounted for. She had anticipated the mole's pattern decades ago, and now she was executing the counter. Ahead, a large office door marked "Classified Top Secret" awaited. Inside, the mole stood at a bank of monitors, oblivious to the storm approaching. His arrogance was palpable. He didn't hear the soft click of the lock behind him disengaging, or the faint whisper of the sliding through the reader. Entered silently. "Surprised to see me," she said, voice calm but ice cold. The mole spun around, eyes widening. "Rhodes, impossible you were." "Dead," she finished for him. "That's what you wanted everyone to believe." Her gaze pierced through him. 20 years ago you thought burying me would protect your operation. You were wrong." He reached for a panic button but was faster. In one smooth motion she blocked his hand, snapping the device with a precise strike she had practiced countless times. The alarm blared too late. Within seconds, and a team of elite agents flooded the room, securing him without a single shot fired. Walked over to the monitors. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, isolating every data packet, every hidden transfer, every communication. Within minutes, she neutralized the mole's network completely. The threat that had haunted for decades was gone. Stepped forward, awe on his face. "You just dismantled an operation we thought untouchable." Allowed a faint, tired smile. It was never untouchable, just ignored. Outside, the F-22s maintained their patrol, silent sentinels watching the city. Their presence had ensured she could return safely. But now, their mission was no longer escorting. It was protecting the aftermath. Rhodes looked out a Pentagon window, eyes scanning the horizon. For 20 years she had been a ghost, a shadow, a secret erased from official history. Tonight she had returned not for glory, but to finish what had been started long ago. Watched her nodding the quiet strength that had kept her alive all these years. "What now?" he asked. She closed her eyes briefly, taking a breath. "Now we make sure this never happens again. And then," she said, voice softening, "I disappear once more, but this time on my own terms." The mole was secured, the Pentagon safe, and the country none the wiser to the near catastrophe averted by one woman who refused to remain forgotten. Rhodes, once presumed dead, stepped into the night with purpose, the legacy of finally complete. Somewhere in the shadows, her locket glinted, a symbol of survival, resilience, and the quiet power of one person determined to protect a nation, even when everyone else had turned away. The F-22s streaked across the sky, disappearing into the horizon, and the city exhaled unknowingly, safe again, thanks to the woman who had returned, faced her past, and ensured the future remained intact. Rhodes had come home,